There comes a time in everybody's career, no matter how good they've been, that they become sort of irrelevant. Here's 6 players that I think will be mostly irrelevant in fantasy football this year, and 6 players I think you should take instead who won't be. Now, I don't know if Davante Adams will be completely irrelevant in 2024, but for a guy still being drafted in the second round, he is certainly not going to be worth that. Even last year, where he was being drafted in the same exact spot, he wasn't worth a second round pick. He only had 4 wide receiver 1 weeks on the entire season, and we're going into 2024 with so much uncertainty. Who is the quarterback going to be? We know the head coach, Antonio Pierce, wants to establish it. He wants to run the football, and he's going to run the football. Is there really going to be enough here for Davante Adams at 32 years old, who wasn't even that good last year, to pay off a second round ADP? Almost no chance, but you know who will? Drake London. That's right, I am back on the Drake London train after getting mostly burned last year. But you know what? Drake London had 2 wide receiver 1 finishes last year. So Davante Adams only had 2 more than Drake London, despite Drake London having to play with Desmond Ridder and Arthur Smith. Now he gets a massive quarterback upgrade with Kirk Cousins. We already know how good that is, but he also gets a coaching upgrade, not with Raheem Morris, the head coach. I mean, he's fine. He's better than Arthur Smith. But with new offensive coordinator Zach Robinson, who was the passing game coordinator for the Los Angeles Rams, who helped make Puka Nacua one of the best rookie wide receivers statistically that we've ever seen. And Drake London can run a lot of the same routes that Puka Nacua ran last year. He's going to be in that role in this offense with Kirk Cousins. Why draft Davante Adams in the second when you can just get Drake London in the second, who not only is not irrelevant, but is about to become very relevant entering his prime? And now I will say I have taken Travis Kelce a few times, either in an underdog draft or in mock drafts, and I'm kind of backing off on that now because I'm getting a little nervous about Travis Kelce. We saw huge drops in his numbers last year. His yards per reception was down 2 full yards, and he only had 5 touchdowns on the entire year. But what really worries me about Travis Kelce is not the Taylor Swift thing. It's the way the Chiefs view Travis Kelce. They know they need him for that playoff run. We saw a totally different Travis Kelce in the playoffs. He was dominant. The Chiefs know that is what they need to go for that 3rd Super Bowl. They're not going to use him heavily in the regular season. Not to mention, you got Rashee Rice entering year 2, and they just signed Marquise Brown. I think we see a very down year from Travis Kelce, so why take Travis Kelce in fantasy, in the 4th, 5th round, when you could just get Trey McBride in fantasy? This guy was a target monster last year. He's going to be a target monster again. Even if they draft Marvin Harrison or Malik Neighbors or one of the top wide receivers, who else is on this roster to really throw to? Michael Wilson? Okay, fine. I mean, Greg Dortch. Trey McBride is going to be a target monster. We saw in the second half of the season last year how good he was. No reason that won't continue this season. So why waste a pick on Travis Kelce, who's probably going to be mostly irrelevant for fantasy purposes, when you can get Trey McBride, who's probably going to be a stud? Now, when we get to around the 7th, 8th round of drafts right now, we're seeing some running backs go in this range that kind of have some question marks. Let's start with Tony Pollard. Tony Pollard was another guy who burned me last year. I was very high on him. He was in a perfect situation. He was a workhorse running back for the Dallas Cowboys. Now, not so much. He's going to be one of 2 running backs for the Tennessee Titans. And I know you think, oh, Tennessee, that's a good team because they run the ball a lot. Well, they used to. They're not going to anymore. New head coach Brian Callahan comes from the Cincinnati Bengals. He's a pass-first guy, and we've already seen with the moves they make what they want to do. Because Tyjae Spears, he's already a good pass catcher. What is Tony Pollard's skill set? Mostly being out in space and catching passes, not between the tackles. So he brought in another pass-catching running back. Then they just paid Calvin Ridley to be like the 10th highest paid wide receiver. They want to throw the football. This is not going to be a run-heavy offense like we were used to with Derrick Henry. But now you're talking about a pass-heavy offense where he's splitting with Tyjae Spears. I don't see how Tony Pollard is really that relevant this year. I mean, sure, he'll probably have some weeks because, touchdowns, but that's probably about it. And if you want to gamble on a running back in this range, why not DeAndre Swift? We already know the upside DeAndre Swift has. He's younger, and he's in a potentially better situation. Yes, right now that Chicago backfield is crowded, but there's talks about them trading Khalil Herbert. And I got to think with the money they paid DeAndre Swift, he's eventually going to win this job. And if he is the RB1 in Chicago in this offense, that's going to be a great spot for him. So why take a pick on Tony Pollard, who's going to a worse situation and really wasn't great last year anyways, when you can get DeAndre Swift, who is set up to potentially be a league winner this year? And then same goes for Austin Eckler going in this range. Again, not a good year last year. Some people blaming that ankle, but I mean, how long can you really blame the ankle? Like, Does an ankle injury take, 12 weeks to heal here? It wasn't that bad. We've seen guys come back from ankle injuries and be just fine. Austin Ekeler never looked the same last year. Now he's going to Washington, where we know Brian Robinson is the lead back. So he's probably going to be nothing more than a change of pace back. Maybe he gets some goal line work, catches some passes, but is that really what you want in fantasy? Is that really getting it done for you? Why not instead take a guy like Javonte Williams? I know Javonte Williams, nobody wants to draft Javonte Williams right now, but this is the year to gamble on Javonte. In year one, Javonte ranked 17th in targets among all running backs despite splitting with Melvin Gordon, and he was one of the most efficient runners in terms of breaking tackles, evading tackles. Then, of course, the year he tore his ACL, he was again one of the best in terms of breaking tackles, was averaging over 5 targets per game. Then, of course, last year, a down year, but that's to be expected coming off of ACL. But he's still once again ranked 17th in targets. It's highly unlikely the Broncos are going to target running back in this draft. They have way bigger needs. This roster needs so much. This is not a running back class where I'm scared of a running back coming in and taking Javonte's work. He was the workhorse running back last year. Now he's going to be 2 years removed from ACL, fully healthy. He's a good player. He's a good pass catcher. Yeah, he's probably going to get held back by the offense a little bit, but this is the 7th, 8th round of your draft. So if you're going to gamble on a running back in this range, don't gamble on a guy like Austin Ekeler, who's probably way past his prime. Gamble on Javonte, who's going to finally be fully healthy and is entering his prime. And then when we get to the later rounds, was Gabe Davis ever really relevant in fantasy? Sure, he had some boom weeks, 3 times a year or whatever it was, but the rest of the time he was pretty much awful. And that was with playing with Buffalo with Josh Allen. Now he's got to go to Jacksonville, where that's like, look, I like Trevor Lawrence. I still think Trevor Lawrence can be great, but this is not an upgrade for Gabe Davis by any stretch. And you got to think the Jags are going to be looking for a wide receiver in this draft after not being able to re-sign Calvin Ridley. So really, honestly, there's probably like 50 guys I would take over Gabe Davis. But in this range, if you want to gamble on a wide receiver, if you want to go with a risky upside wide receiver, go look at rookie Ladd McConkey. He's getting some buzz, but not a ton. It's obviously, he's still going outside the top 100 players. But I think this guy has what it takes to be successful in the NFL. He's a good route runner. He's a good player, but he does need to land in the right spot. But if he does land in the right spot, not only will he have the upside that people think Gabe Davis has, or they think they're getting with Gabe Davis, but he'll have much better consistency as well and actually help you on a week-to-week basis. So when you get to the later rounds of your draft and you see Gabe Davis there and you think, maybe I should gamble on him here, don't do it. Go ahead and gamble on Ladd McConkey instead. And are there any Jerry Jeudy truthers left? And if so, did they get excited about Cleveland? Like when he got signed by Cleveland, were you like, oh, this is it. This is what Jerry Jeudy needed? Because it didn't do it for me. Who's he playing with? Deshaun Watson here, who, a couple years ago, that would have been like, oh, this is exciting. He's playing with Deshaun Watson. But the Deshaun Watson we've seen in Cleveland is not a quarterback that gets me excited about the wide receiver. Not to mention, there's already a number 1 wide receiver here. That's Amari Cooper. And the fact that Jerry Jeudy, he's not very good. And if you still believe he's good, I don't know what to tell you. The guy's never had 1,000 yards in his career. He's never had a ton of touchdowns. He's never had a ton of catches. At what point do we just say, okay, he's not as good as people thought he was going to be? He's entering year 5 now. We know who he is. He's fine. He's okay. But this isn't the situation that makes me excited for Jerry Jeudy. But he's still getting drafted, and I don't understand why. But I'll say, if you want to gamble on kind of like a guy who's always kind of hyped up and never seems like he's really lived up to the hype, why not just gamble on Curtis Samuel? He actually did go to a situation that gets me excited. He's now in Buffalo. He's got a real quarterback, a real offense here that gets me excited. Look, Curtis Samuel, one of these guys, I've always liked Curtis Samuel. He's probably a little bit overhyped. I probably like him a little too much, but he's been decently productive. He could be good in this offense. We're talking about a late round pick here. I would much rather gamble on Curtis Samuel with Josh Allen than Jerry Jeudy with Deshaun Watson any day of the week. Sadly, those players are probably going to be irrelevant this year, but if you want to see 10 players you are likely way too low on, check out this video right here.